When the words coming out of your mouth are true and you believe what you're saying, that's authenticity. Welcome back to another episode of I Am Nineveh. So glad to have you here today. We're going to dive right into a topic that many of you have actually reached out to me about. In fact, somebody sent me a message on Instagram not too long ago, and they asked me this question: do you ever sleep? And I think what they were implying was, I'm assuming, but I think what they're implying was, how do you get so much done? How are you achieving all these goals? Help me out. They didn't actually ask me those questions, but I believe that's what it implied. To me, productivity is all about focus, and focus requires you to set up an optimal environment, an environment that actually supports your goals. To me, productivity is all about setting up systems. How can I achieve more while doing less? And yes, it is possible. And the answer to that question about whether I sleep or not is absolutely yes, I sleep. That is really important to get your sleep, by the way. I'm not about the hustle and I'm not about the grind. Why? Been there, done that, and that leads to burnout. I know that it may be working for you right now. Some of you ladies that are listening and you're like, look at me, I'm such a hustler, I'm such a grinder. Take it from me, someone who has a lot of experience in this, somebody who's been in the workforce for over 25 years. It is only a matter of time that you are going to hit that brick wall and burn out. So let's talk about productivity. I think if you're working an insane amount of hours, it's because you don't have the proper systems set up. You don't have the optimal environment. So yes, I sleep. I sleep 7 to 8 hours a night. Last night, I got 9 hours of sleep. I'm still catching up on sleep as a mom, so I will take it where I can get it. I do not work late at night. By the way, personally, I don't like to work late at night because that gets my mind in motion. And what I'm actually trying to do in the evening time is I'm trying to wind down, not wind up. And a lot of times when you work at night, you're winding yourself up and then you have a difficult time falling asleep, or you'll fall asleep and you'll wake up thinking about work because that's the last thing that you were doing right before you fell asleep. So it's very important that you have some routine set up in the morning hours and in the evening hours, which is what we're going to talk about. Sometimes I do get the inspiration to work in the early morning hours when my creative juices are flowing between the hours of 7 to 8 or even earlier, depending on what time I got up. But that's only if I have done what I need to do first to actually set up my day. Whatever you do, do not get up in the morning, roll out of bed, check your phone like we all do, check your phone and check work, check Slack, and then just start operating out of that framework, operating out of into work mode immediately when you get up. Sometimes I send messages in the morning when I'm, working between 7 and 8, but I don't expect people to answer. And so sometimes when people in the company are answering that early, I'm like, did you just roll out and answer me immediately? Because not everything is urgent. I want you to understand that, okay? You do not have to apply a sense of urgency to everything that you receive. The thing about technology, it's such a wonderful thing, such a wonderful leveraging point, but oftentimes it puts us into a hyper-arousal state, and it makes everything appear as if it is urgent. And oftentimes it is not urgent, and that is why you need to understand how to be productive and how to focus so you can prioritize what's urgent, what's not urgent, and then move into flow instead of in a hyper-arousal state. So there are many components actually to accelerating your productivity, and today I'm going to break that down for you, plus give you my personal recipe on how I operate my days. Operating your life and operating your schedule is no different than operating a business. What do I mean by that? There are many, many businesses out there that operate in chaos. I have seen it. I don't talk much about my professional background in the shows, that I'm an expert at scaling companies. I've helped grow and flip multiple 7- and 8-figure businesses. And what I've learned over the past decade plus now is that how you approach running a household, how you approach running your life, how you approach running parenthood, your marriage, your body should be no different than how you would build, operate, and optimize a business. Okay, so this framework that I'm about to share is really applicable for anyone, whether you're operating the household and just operating yourself or operating a business. This is applicable to all of us. If you've got chaos at home, I guarantee that your business is full of chaos as well, and vice versa. Now, I got to say something real quick. I'm personally not an expert at productivity. So I have not written books about productivity, how to be productive. I'm not a speaker when it comes to productivity. That's not my main niche or anything. I think there are a lot of people who have written books about this topic, but here's the issue that I have with some of the experts out there, and it's not anyone in particular that I'm calling out. It's just that a lot of those books and a lot of the advice is actually coming from men. And personally, what I'm sharing is my framework based on my life experience, right? As a female, a working woman, a mother, and just trying to juggle it all. And so through the chaos that I have personally experienced, I've had to set up these frameworks so that I can go from overwhelmed, right, which happens, and I've found myself there multiple times. You go from overwhelmed to being focused and productive. And what does that take? And how do we shift those things at different seasons of our life? The fact is, and I was looking at some of the data, and I'm not going to run through the data right now, that women do more, especially working women. They do more. They manage more in the household and the tasks surrounded around motherhood, and then also operating their business or being in business, working in corporate or executive, than men do. So there's still not that equality in the partnership, and I think that we can do better as women to actually have those conversations with men. You know, I don't think they're trying to be sexist or it's coming from a place of that. It's coming from a lack of awareness, and I think that we can help our men become better by opening up, being vulnerable, and sharing our perspective and asking for help and giving ourselves permission to ask for that help, because we don't need to do it all. Now, a lot of us have actually been sold on the dream of passive income, and the reason why I bring this up is because there is nothing passive about life. There is rest. There is certainly rest, and we should take that rest and prioritize our rest. But there's nothing as human beings, there's nothing we ever do as humans is actually passive, except perhaps breathing. Like, we don't need to think about breathing unless, you know, you're feeling anxiety, then all you're thinking about is the breathing, right? Whereas there are some things that are passive, but do we live passive lives? Not really. Passive implies that you don't have to pay attention to it. And that's why I mention it. We are either growing or we're going in the opposite direction. There's up or down. You can only coast for so long before the engine runs out of fuel. Makes sense, right? So you've got to remove this fantasy, I think, of retirement, because you've got to get really interested in building a life that is optimized. Retirement is something our parents' generation was sold on. And I'm not sure that I'm really buying into that dream, because when you're passive, what happens? You disintegrate. We're all designed to have purpose. So I think the system has designed this concept of retirement, and it's made us complacent as human beings. When it comes to business, a growing business knows how to set goals and put together a system to help the people inside the company achieve them. And if the goals are not met, what do you think happens? The business owner goes back and analyzes, retrospects, what do I need to change? What do I need to adjust? And then puts together a new plan. The problem with people is that we are running the same operating system for our lives from a decade ago. Think about that. We are running an outdated operating system. So we all have a way of operating. We all have systems set up, whether we like to admit it or not. We all have routines in place for our lives, but those routines may have been set up during a season of life that has passed for you. And so that operating system is no longer applicable, but you're using the old framework and you're overwhelmed and you're like, why am I so overwhelmed? It's because your operating system is completely outdated. See, your life has shifted, your life has changed. It is a new season, but you're running on an old season of routines. See, picking up what I'm putting down, right? You've got to reassess your life's operating system either annually or when you enter a new season. If everything feels like chaos and you've reached that threshold, an alarm is actually sounding off in your body and in your mind. Time for a reset, time to reset your mode of doing, your way of living. For example, you give birth to a baby and you try to run your life on the old operating system. What do you think is going to happen? A lot of us do that, ladies. We get pregnant, we birth a baby, and we're like, oh, we're just going to go back to the way it was, right? And you get very frustrated and into a depressive mode because you're like trying to bring the old operating system before you had a baby into your new way of living, and it's in conflict. It doesn't work. And so what happens is it creates this misalignment, it creates this anxiety, it creates the frustration, which creates the chaos coming from those thought patterns, and then we become very, very overwhelmed, and we wonder why. You didn't upgrade your environment. You decide not to get support to help account for the time that you're going to be spending with your child instead of doing X, Y, Z. What do you think is going to happen when you approach that season of life with the old framework, with the old operating system? Overwhelm, crash, explosion. Let's avert disaster. Let's avoid that disaster. Another example, any big life change would be whether it's positive or negative, right? A big move to a new city or a new state. A new career is a life change. It's exciting, but it's still a change in a new season, right? Let's say a family member needs more support than usual. You are going to have to, as a partner, adjust the way you approach your days. So your wife pops out a baby and you're still, as a man and a husband, operating out of your old operating system before a baby arrived. That's not cool. Your way of living doesn't get to continue in the old way. Even if you really liked it, you've got to adjust the way you operate as well to support your partner in their transition in life. Otherwise, we're like, why are you guys married? Think about that. A lot of you are running on outdated operating systems. So how do we achieve all the things we want to do? First thing, the most important thing is figuring out what it is that you want. You need to know what you're aiming for. A lot of people don't have that kind of clarity in their life. They don't actually know what they want. They just know that they feel chaos. They feel overwhelmed. They actually haven't sat down to identify what their vision is. You've got to write that down on a piece of paper, honestly. What is your goal? What do you want to accomplish in the next 2 to 3 years? Let's start there instead of asking, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? The rest of your life is a long time. That's really, really, really going high level, right? So let's kind of go micro with this, right? Because I think when we are asked this question, even as young kids, what do you want to do, little Johnny, little Susie, for the rest of your life? And it's like a 5-year-old, really? You're going to put that kind of hey, what interests you? What do you like to do? Not what are you going to do for the rest of your life? That really boxes us in, if you think about it. Because we're always evolving. I can't just pick one thing I want to do for the rest of my life. If I'm always evolving and progressing and growing as a human being, don't you think what I'm going to be doing is going to change and evolve in that process as well? This whole notion and idea that we should pick one thing is completely outdated as well. So I think when we ask ourselves, what do I want? It's like asking, what do I want for the rest of my life? That sometimes can be overwhelming in itself. And it's something I think that you work your way up to. It's a progression, right? So number 1, know what you want, write it down and read it daily. This actually creates focus for you. Positive thinking patterns and focusing on what you want is actually a practice. It's not something we're necessarily born with. We are wired to survive, which means we are wired to think negative. Negative? Did I say naked? Almost. We are wired to think negative, right? Which means we actually have to put effort, consistent effort into wiring ourselves to naturally be forward positive thinkers. We're wired to think negative because we're wired to survive, right? But you've got to take control of the unconscious mind, of that center of your brain. Number 2, so number 1 is know what you want. Number 2 is set up your daily routine. Write down what your ideal day looks like. What does your ideal day look like? Have you ever asked yourself that question? If you had all the help and all the resources in the world, you had all the money in the world, you had all the help in the world. Everybody always thinks this is their problem, by the way. This is why I say it with that kind of voice and that kind of attitude. Well, if I had as much money as so-and-so, you've got to think outside the box and you've got to get creative. The tools and the resources are not the issue. Okay, the issue is that you haven't asked yourself this very important question. What does my ideal day look like? Don't worry about the details. So you haven't even identified what your ideal day looks like. You're just going along for the ride. You're not even at the control panel of the ride. You're just allowing yourself to be operating in chaos because you haven't asked yourself this very important question. What does my ideal day look like? And if I had all the resources and help in the world, which I think I'm going to be positive here, that those things will appear, those solutions and those answers will appear when I ask myself this question. How would you like to operate? What do you want your weeks to look like? What do you want your months to look like? What about your quarters? What about the year? Break down things like, well, once a month, I'd like to get a massage. Once a quarter, I'd like a staycation or a night away. Weekly, I want date nights with my husband or my wife, my partner. Annually, we want a family vacation. I'm just giving you some ideas. These are all personal examples of goals that I've actually written down. There may be other things that I'm not mentioning. Write those down for yourself. Get very clear on the vision and then everything else in between. So I've asked myself this very question. What does my ideal day look like? Now, how can I design and schedule my day to operate in this way? Start asking the questions. What kind of environment would I need? What kind of support would I need? And write down the answers. I just recently did a reset for myself, so I know this stuff works, okay? When everything begins to feel like too much, you need to stop. It is a sign that you need to stop and create some breathing room for yourself and to create that space for yourself to think. Otherwise, you're getting overwhelmed, you're getting frazzled, you're all up in your head and you can't get out of your head. And the way to get out of your head is exactly that. Get out of it and put it on paper and start asking yourself some intelligent questions here, right? You've got to get out of your head and get it on paper. That's like my biggest piece of advice. And what I would also ask yourself is like, do a comparison. How are my days operating right now? Because if you write the answer down to that question, you're having a real honest conversation with yourself. And you're like, oh, is that how I'm operating my day? Oh, well, no wonder I'm overwhelmed. No wonder things feel chaotic. No wonder I feel XYZ negative emotions, right? The way that you're operating right now, the answer to that question, how are my days operating right now? And what does my ideal day actually look like? You put those side by side and you're going to see that they're not matching up, right? The mode that you're in right now does not match up to the way that you want to operate. And so what that'll help you do is, one, have an honest conversation with yourself. It'll also help you identify what it is that you want, what it is that you need to actually optimize in your life. And you can begin to start mapping what it would take to get closer to that type of day, that ideal day, right? Because we live in days. A lot of us live so future tense. We got to get present. We got to get obsessed with the days and the moments and the hours and the minutes Like we're getting obsessed about the years and the decades, and then like we're losing focus on the now. And this is the way to kind of get so micro that you're just putting one step in front of the other, one foot in front of the other. And it just keeps you focused in the now, which is very helpful for your emotional state too. Thanks for tuning into my show. I'm the founder of Scale Ventures and want to invite you to learn more about how we help high-achieving men and women just like you. As a shareholder and owner of multiple 7- and 8-figure businesses, my company can help bring order to the chaos in your business. Find out if you qualify and get on my wait list at scaleventures.com. That's spelled SKAYLE ventures.com. So what you want to do is start mapping what it would take to get closer to your ideal day and then begin to move towards it. You just got to begin to move towards it. Day by day, you want to create actionable steps that you can take until your ideal day becomes your new operating system. So this ain't going to happen overnight. You can try, but then you're aiming for perfection, and I would advise you not to try to do that because that's when people quit. Oh, it's not working. Well, it's not going to work that easily, right? This is going to take effort just like anything, and then consistency. So one of the things about having an ideal day, especially if you're a working woman, you're a mother, you're a parent, maybe you're a male and in the same situation, you've got a partner, you've got a husband or wife. I think once you've mapped out what your ideal day looks like, your partner may have a different idea of what their ideal day looks like. So you've got to have that conversation. You've got to have that challenging conversation with your partner. And this ideal day, these answers may make you reassess the way that you're operating your marriage, right? So that's why I say it may bring up some challenges, but you got to work through it. It may make you reassess your career or assessing a conversation with your boss about structuring work in a way that's actually going to support you. And you should have that honest conversation. For me personally, and by the way, I want to go back to that. So let's say you're like, I'm going to talk to my boss about restructuring my day in a way that is going to support the life that I live. Make sure that you've also had that challenging conversation with your partner, okay? Because there's only so much the workplace can do to try to create equality for you. If you don't have equality in your home, you ain't going to have equality in the workplace. It's just not going to work. You need support at every layer, not just in the workplace. You just can't put it on the business owner to try to create that equality for you. Got to do the work too. You got to do the tough work on yourself too, okay? This is like, let's meet together on this, right? Not have your company do everything and then just hand it to you. That's an entitled attitude. I just want to bring that up. So you're going to have the tough conversation with your partner, and you guys are going to be better off for it. Maybe for a couple weeks, you're going to be pissed off at each other, but that's okay. You're going to have to reunite at some point and then work through it, and it will all be worth it. And if you get your partner used to this and you start to reassess your operating system at every season or at every change that there is in your life or annually, your marriage is going to be much better off for it. For me personally, I do want to share with you what I've been doing recently, my morning and evening routines, along with structuring my days in a way that I can get in a workout and a nice walk is non-negotiable. So when I say routines, like we don't have to create such strictness around our routines. We need to just identify what it is that is going to make you feel good that day. If you hit 2 to 3 specific targets when it comes to your routine, maybe you don't check off all of them. If you're aiming to check off all of them all the time, you're aiming for perfection, like I mentioned. But what are a couple of things? Like I said, I got to get in my training. I got to get in my workout. That's a non-negotiable. I need to get in a nice walk as well, either throughout my workday, at the end of the workday, or in the evening. That is a non-negotiable, so I can wind down and wind my mind down as well. So here's an example of my morning routine. My husband actually personally gets up at 4:30 in the morning. He's got his routine down. I'm like, okay, we need to talk about our routines together here. All right? Because you've got a routine. It's working real nice for you. And then it's affecting how I operate. So that's why you guys need to get aligned. And I'm not saying that you're going to poo-poo on your partner's routine, but they need to be aware of the support that you need and vice versa. Like, okay, this has got to be a win-win. If it's not a win-win, someone's losing, and that's not okay. And that's what creates resentment in a marriage. So here's an example of my morning routine. I wake up at 5:30, 6 in the morning. I go down, I organize my vitamins for the day. I prep 3 plates for breakfast for myself, my husband, and our daughter. And then I prep my coffee. I make some hot water with apple cider vinegar, and I take my probiotic, and I sit down. I don't always get to the hot water with apple cider vinegar, so it's okay. It doesn't have to go perfectly. But the breakfast is a non-negotiable. Gotta eat breakfast for me within the first hour of waking up to stabilize my blood sugar. I'd shared that in a past episode about how important it is, especially as women, for our hormones to have a healthy, meaty breakfast, okay? And so I just make breakfast for everyone, and it's pretty much the same every day. Eggs, a little bit of cheese if they want it, some fruit with peanut butter, no peanut butter, boom, you've hit your protein, fat, and carbs right there. And so I do that, and I do a 3-minute breath work with a Call Me Go, which I shared in one of my past episodes about anxiety and the devil of anxiety. That is a nice device, and it's quick. It's 3 minutes, and it just helps you breathe, right? And I just ordered a PEMF mat, a PEMF mat. So that hasn't arrived yet, but I'm going to incorporate that into my morning routine, 10 minutes. Right now I'm doing 3-minute breath work. I have another tool that I use on my chest that kind of vibrates and opens up the vagus nerve. So I'm getting into a relaxed state. And then what I do is I fill out my 5-minute journal. The reason why I'm getting into a relaxed state is because our cortisol is the highest in the morning time. And if you compound that cortisol with a bunch of really stressful activity, like rolling out of bed and working and getting your adrenaline pumping, you're just going into a state of fight or flight immediately, and that's not healthy. So you want to just kind of like bring yourself down a little bit. Your cortisol is already high. You don't need any more adrenaline to have enough energy for the day. So I try to bring myself into a calm state. And you don't need a lot of time. You need to lead like a whole hour. Like as a working woman and a mother and with a daughter who's waking up at like 7:30 in the morning, who used to wake up at 6 a.m. and 5:30 in the morning, like that doesn't work. If I can just get in 15 minutes, I feel better. If I can get in an hour, hallelujah. That is a miracle from God. Okay? So that's why I'm saying let's focus on what we can do, ladies. Let's focus on what we can do. And let's make it achievable. This whole like morning power hour might not actually work for you. This is why I say a lot of the people that write, like they don't have kids. They don't even have partners, y'all. A lot of these entrepreneurs, like they don't got anything going on, so they can have these like perfect morning routines. I mean, it's just like so not relatable to me. And by the way, anything that I'm sharing with you, if it is not applicable to your life, don't use it. And if you apply it to your life and it doesn't work, I want you to let go of any shame or guilt that you would have around that, because not everything I share is going to apply to your life, because you may be in a different season and you may want to adjust it. So what my advice to you is actually to have discernment. Have discernment around the advice and the wisdom that you're given, because we all have very, very different lives. And so I'm just sharing what works for me. And if it works for you, great. If you can incorporate one thing, win. But I want you to have that discernment. That's very, very important. It's something I learned. When I try to live somebody else's life and it doesn't work for me, it doesn't ever, by the way, work for you when you try to live somebody else's life off Instagram. You just carry so much shame and guilt around that, and you just frustrate yourself even more. So I really recommend that you just turn that noise off and have discernment around the books that you're reading, the content that you're consuming, including mine, right? So I'm waking up, and one of my favorite things to do, back to the morning routine, wake up, and I'm not saying you need to wake up at 5:30. If it's 6, 7, 8, 9, hey, more power to you, okay? Depends on your life, depends on your season. But my point is, can you get 15 minutes in? Can you get 30 minutes in? Can you get an hour in? Can you work up to that hour? Let's start with 10, 15 minutes and do that for 30 days. So breath work for 3 minutes, relaxed state for the remainder of the 10 to 15 minutes, and then I fill out my 5-minute journal. The 5-minute journal is magic. It's magic, okay? And you can get it off Amazon. That's all you got to do. You just go on to Amazon. I think it's like under $30, $20. It's the 5-minute journal, and it prompts you with a series of very simple questions for the morning and evening time. Boom, done. Everybody's got 5 minutes in the morning. Everybody's got 5 minutes in the evening. If you don't, you need to reassess what operating system you're running right now. So I fill out my 5-minute journal, and that puts me in a positive state. I read my leadership Bible. It's a page, a short paragraph, and I love that. And then I read and write out. If I've got time to write out my self-image statement, I do that. But I, at the very least, read it and read it out loud, and then I listen to it. And then and only then do I check Slack, work emails, etc. So by now it's 7:30 in the morning. Maybe it's 8 in the morning. Maybe it's 6:30 in the morning. It just depends on when I woke up. And I don't have a hard rule on what time I wake up. And here's why. Because we got a 5-year-old. Sometimes she wakes up in the middle of the night. And so if my sleep has been interrupted, then I just give myself permission to sleep until I naturally wake up. Okay, because I don't want to put that pressure or that stress on me. And so sometimes I'm waking up later than 5:30, and that's okay. But I'm very focused on getting that 15-minute routine in and building it up to 30 minutes, building it up to 45, and then an hour, both morning and evening. But it's just sometimes it's not realistic, especially in the evening time when you're getting the kids ready for bed. Is it realistic to just sit in your room for an entire hour and not be interrupted? No. So let me start with 10, 15 minutes, and that's going to feel more like a win, something that I can achieve, and something that I can do consistently, and then build on top of that. It's sort of like a fitness program. Like you just run right into it. You can't just run right into it. You got to build into it and then build those habits and that consistency over time. You want to stack. So let's start small here, right? So question probably is like, hey, Nineveh, do you get that in the morning routine that you're sharing and the evening routine that you're sharing like every single day? Does it go perfectly? No. But these are the type of daily habits that are going to keep you focused and set your day up for more success, more productivity, and more positivity. And weekly, what I do is I go over my schedule. I block out times that I plan to work on to-dos, and then I map out my to-dos daily. I prioritize them from low, medium, and high. I finish all the low because honestly, we focus on what's easiest. That's just how we are wired as humans. We don't always start with the hardest things. We avoid the hardest things oftentimes. We're all avoiding our high priority items. We're getting to the low. So the low is going to help you achieve the wins. That's why I like to start with the low. Then I move on to the medium, and then I chip away at the high priority items. If I move immediately into high priority items, that will tend to give you a lot of frustration and anxiety because you're trying to tackle the most difficult thing at once at the start of your day. And so you want to just go low, medium, high. And what you're doing is you're building that resiliency up throughout your day. I finish all the low, get to a few mediums, and like I said, I just begin to work on high priority items. I chip away at them. You know what happens when you chip away at high priority items the next day and the next day and the next week? Those high priority items now become medium and eventually become low. Okay, so that's my little trick. What I do in the evening time is after work, I always like to wind down with a walk. Okay, I try to do this midday after lunch because you've eaten and a walk just helps you digest your food. If you're like, no, Nineveh, I can't do it. I'm at my, seat all day. I'm in meetings all day. I would ask yourself, which meetings can you take on the phone? Which meetings can you do on FaceTime? Do you actually have to sit at your desk? Do you have to sit at your desk? Probably not for all of them. Honestly, if you're having like weekly check-ins with your teammates virtually, do them while you're walking and do the FaceTime or don't do the FaceTime. When I meet with a team here physically, that's precisely what I do. I'm like, hey, good to see you. Maybe we'll spend 10 minutes at the computer, go over a few things. I'm like, let's go. Let's walk and talk. Let's get moving. So I know that there are meetings that you can take while you are in motion too. But right after lunch is a good time. And like I said, I try to do this midday. And then if I don't get to it midday, because sometimes we have busy work days, right? I definitely like to take at least a 10-minute walk, even if it's 5 minutes. Man, even if it's 2 minutes. I'd like it to be 15 to 30 minutes. That would be ideal. But I do that at the end of my workday before I go pick up my daughter. So it just helps me wind down and then be in the present moment when I pick her up. So I'm not thinking about all the things that I didn't finish. And so what you also want to do at the end of your workday is move any of the items that you didn't get to, your to-dos. Instead of looking at the items that you didn't get to and couldn't finish, you can decide, hey, what can I get to in the early evening hours? Maybe a couple of low items. That's fine, right? I'll answer some Slack messages, get a couple more low priority item tasks knocked off. What do I need to move to the next day? Let's be realistic here. We're not trying to finish every single thing you want to aim to. What you want to aim to do is actually discover what your productivity level is, what you're reasonably able to achieve. That's what you want to figure out for yourself. You're not aiming for perfection. I didn't knock out every single item on my to-do list, and so now I'm a failure. Puts you into this perfectionist mode, and that gives you more anxiety. So it's like, okay, I didn't finish like 5 things that I thought I could do, but clearly there's only so much time in the day. I'm going to move these over to the next day. I'm going to feel good about that. So if you physically move them over on your calendar, it's going to shut that door in your mind. You lock it up and you move on with your day. The walk helps you wind down, get into a present moment, go pick up your kids, and then be able to do the mom stuff, the parent stuff. Now with kids, I understand that it's going to be challenging to fit in me time. This is where it's really crucial to talk to your man or woman. Okay. So what we're trying to do now is switch off those bedtime routines. On the nights that I may have time, I'm going to repeat my morning routine in the evening. But I'm at the very least every single day going to do that 5-minute journal. Even if I'm doing bedtime, I'm like, okay, why don't you color? Why don't you draw, sweetheart? I just got to go to my room real quick. And I just sit there for 5-10 minutes, okay? And I let my husband know. It's not at the very end of the night, but at least I'm circling back and finishing off the day, and I'm answering the questions in my 5-minute journal, and I feel accomplished that I've closed the door and that I'm sitting in gratitude, because that's what that 5-minute journal does for you, is it helps you get into a state of gratitude. On the nights that I don't, like I said, the 5-minute journal is the non-negotiable to close the loop in my head. And I think what you've got to do is going to come up with like the 2 to 3 things, or even just 2 things, or the 1 thing that is non-negotiable for your morning routine and your evening routine. If you can get a stack of 2 to 3 things that you win in the morning and win in the evening, then you felt like you got your me time. And that's very important, because if you don't get your you time, then that's when you get into that chaotic way of operating, and it can be very frustrating when you compound that over time. That's when we really create the overwhelm for ourselves, especially as women. I don't want you to be there. You don't need to be there. I've been there myself, and it's just, it's a terrible place to be in. So if there's anything out of this entire conversation that we've had together, because I know I've said a lot, so if you listen to this episode while you're working out or walking or in the car, I encourage you to go back to it and just jot down a few notes. I want to encourage you to be a note taker too. If there's one thing that I'd implement right now, it's that 5-minute journal daily for 30 days. Do it for 30 days straight, and I promise your outlook on life is going to be massively improved. You'll have opened up enough space in your mind to think of what other things could you do to improve your daily life, to optimize your daily life. So to recap here, number 1, you need to know what it is that you want. That's going to help you focus. You need to create that statement. You need to write it down, the self-image statement. What do I want, right? You need to, number 2, create a morning routine that you can actually stick to. Be realistic. I get all the gurus, which I'm not a guru, are convincing you to be unrealistic. Oh, like, let's be realistic about this season in your life. What kind of morning routine can you actually have? Number 3, you need a nighttime routine to close the loop and put your day into positive perspective. And the only way to achieve those things above is by what? Creating a supportive environment and getting to work on your action plan what does my ideal day look like? Ask yourself that question and have that crucial conversation with your partner. You got to have the crucial conversation with your partner if you're not single. I hope that helped. I know I mentioned the 5-minute journal multiple times. Like I mentioned earlier, I think you can get it under $25-$30 on Amazon. Pick whatever pretty color you want. Thanks so much for listening. Quite a few of you asked me about how to be productive, to share my hacks. There it is. If you'd like to share what your productivity hacks are, or if you end up implementing any of this stuff and it's helped you, I'd love to hear from you. You can find me on Instagram. That's where I'm most active, at Nineveh Madsen. Thanks for listening.